Hello you guys, and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and thank you so much for joining me today and taking a look at that montage of photos and videos from our trip to China. If you've been following along for a while, you'll know Jake and I took a pretty big trip this summer and are kind of recapping each part of the world that we went to in a video form. So today I'm going to be discussing our time in China. We ended up visiting Beijing and staying there for 5 days. So we definitely saw a lot, but of course, obviously there's so much more that we could have seen or that we could have visited if we had stayed longer. But I hope that this gives you a little bit of insight into kind of what we did and what we saw. Of course, as we watch as well, I'm going to give you some travel tips in case you also would like to go to China in the future, specifically Beijing. Now, in the planning process, China was definitely something on my list. Specifically, visiting the Great Wall of China has always been a big dream of mine, and we were able to make that a reality. So that was one of the factors that was motivating this trip. But also, I have been very interested in Chinese culture for a long time. Back when I was in college, I worked with a lot of Chinese students and have just always been very curious about things there. Beautiful, rich history. Jake's taught about ancient China for now 5 years. So it was definitely a place we were really interested in going. And overall, I think we had a really wonderful time and a very transformative time. It was the most uncomfortable out of all of the places we went, and it pushed us the most out of our comfort zone. But ultimately, we grew the most from it. I feel like visiting China was the most transformative for us out of the places we went. And I'm super happy that we were able to go there and have that experience. So I'm gonna talk through a little bit of what we did. We really have 4 full days of activity just because the first day we took a flight from Athens, Greece to then Istanbul. It stopped there. Sadly, we were not able to really travel around Istanbul, even though that is definitely a city that's on my wish list, or Turkey is on my wish list as a place I'd love to visit. But we were there, short layover in the airport. So that was an evening flight. We landed in the Istanbul airport around, I want to say 11:30 midnight, and then at 1:30 in the morning, our next flight took off from Istanbul to Beijing. And that flight was a 9-hour flight. And definitely it was kind of like flying through the night, but then when we landed, it was about 3 o'clock Beijing time. So definitely a journey. We were on Turkish Airlines and it was lovely. Their vegan meals on the flight were phenomenal and a great movie selection. I don't remember how many movies I watched on that flight, but definitely a couple at least. So that went as well as it could, being a long flight. And we did, once we landed in China, we were pretty tired just because we basically hadn't slept at all, and it was then, 3 o'clock the next day. So we didn't really do very much the first day. We got to our hotel. We did stay at a hotel, mostly just because we were hoping to have some of the services that a hotel can provide, especially because we were the most out of our comfort zone with the language, as well as, just being a little bit further outside of customs that maybe we had been used to. So we figured a hotel would provide more of those, and prices were very good. We stayed at this awesome hotel and it was like in the 80s per night, at least at the time of year we were booking. So with that in mind, we didn't really do much the first day. I think we honestly went to bed kind of after we had gotten there. We had some of our snacks and I think popped into a convenience store to pick up a few super basic grocery items, and that was really our day. We didn't really do a whole lot. We then got a really good night of sleep, so we'd be ready for the next day. Now, so far on this channel, you've heard us mention a lot that we're really into history, so it's probably no surprise that our first day, our main activity was visiting the official Museum of China, and there was so many wonderful exhibits there. They had an incredibly well done and massive ancient China exhibit, and it took you through all the dynasties. There were massive rooms full of so much information and artifacts, so definitely was really helpful, and especially for Jake since he teaches some of it, but it went into amazing depth. And they also had some more modern exhibits too. Now this was a Sunday we were there, so things were especially crowded since a lot of other people were off and sightseeing, but it was really nice to go to that museum. And then we also spent some time in Tiananmen Square, walking around there, exploring the different places. Now, one of the things that Jake and I both noticed on this first day was realizing that we kind of didn't belong, or we didn't really fit in with you know, many of the other people around. There's definitely a lot of tourism in China, but as far as like, you know, some of the passports I oversaw, it's a lot of people from Japan, Korea, so we really didn't see that many people who looked like us. And so because of that, we also had, you know, more people than I've ever experienced before staring at us or taking pictures of us. It definitely felt a bit uncomfortable, but I am very grateful for the experience, just because it was challenging me to kind of connect that back to, you know, how privileged I've been to, in general in my life, not ever feel, you know, like that visible outsider, and to help me kind of understand what that feels like for people who are in that situation, so I can better support them, and yeah, just to know what that feels like, because honestly I hadn't ever felt that before. But that day overall was very positive, mostly spent, you know, with all of that wonderful information in the museum. We were in that museum for hours. The next day was my favorite day of our time in China, and definitely one of my highlights of the whole trip. It's probably between this day and then our snorkeling day in the Great Barrier Reef. But anyway, on this day we did our Great Wall hike. Now there's a lot of different tours that are available, as well as lots of different sections of the Great Wall of China. The wall itself is over 4,000 kilometers, so there is a massive expanse of wall. Based on some of the research I had done, and then this was proven after we were actually on the tour, there are definitely sections that you'll want to avoid because they are completely packed. There's 2 sections outside of Beijing that are incredibly crowded, and you see more people than wall just because it's so packed. And we purposely booked a tour that was taking you in much more remote areas of the wall, so you'd be able to kind of hike the wall in peace. And it was really cool, actually. I will link all the information below, but it's with Beijing walking tours, and our guide was Leo, and he was phenomenal. We had such a wonderful day in so many ways. We had a lot of fun there. We learned so much, so many cool stories as well. He actually also had kind of been studying to be a history teacher, so we all bonded over that. But he took us first to this older section of the wall, so it was able to give a sense of, you know, what that wall had looked like for much of history, and kind of see where, you know, Mongolia used to be able to hike on some of that wall. Some of it was a little precarious, but we felt pretty safe the whole time. And after we hiked for about an hour at this particular stop, then we went to a second site, which was a more modern site, and this one was also gorgeous. We were here for much longer, for several hours, and hiking there was stunning. It just felt like beautiful photo after beautiful photo after beautiful photo. I honestly felt like I was kind of in a dream, just because, I mean, as you might have seen pictures before, that Great Wall really extends as far as the eye can see. You know, you'd see it off in the distance, and then eventually we'd make it to that point, and you'd keep seeing it in the distance, and it's just kind of mind-blowing how it all works. We learned a lot about the guard towers and visited several of those as well. It was just amazing. There's really no other way to put it. And the fact that we were out at these much more quiet places meant that, honestly, our whole day, after 3 to 4 hours of hiking, we really only saw maybe 10 to 15 other people the whole time. So definitely was a wonderful chance for us to really have a magical moment. And our guide Leo actually showed us some images from some of his friends who are guides in more of the busy parts, and all we could see was people in the video clips. It was insanely packed. So definitely, if this is something you're interested in, or you do make it to China, I think it's so worth it to go with a guide, so you can go a bit further away and visit some of those less busy areas of the wall. So I can't recommend it highly enough. I know you might have already gotten a taste of this section, because with Leo we were talking a little bit about the YouTube thing. It came up because he had mentioned about having a YouTube channel, so we were talking a little bit about that, and he actually suggested I actually make a video while I was on the Great Wall. So definitely was not prepared for a video that day, not glammed up or anything, but I'll link that video below and up in the cards if you're interested. Super short video, but it was just a wonderful day. In the description field below, I will also put information about Leo and his company if you're interested. Our third day then, we had booked another tour that was taking us to the Forbidden City, as well as the Summer Palace and the Temple of Heaven. So this actually was not something we had planned too far in advance, but it was one of the packages that the hotel had, and honestly, prices were very good. It was about $55 per person for a full day tour, which honestly is very cheap. It depends a bit on the area, but a lot of the tours and average tour prices I see usually hover around $100 per day, so it was a great deal. We also really appreciated just having a guide because some of these complexes, such as the Forbidden City, are incredibly packed and a bit overwhelming. There's almost 10,000 rooms in the Forbidden City, and so even though most of those rooms are actually closed off to just your general visitors, there's still so many places, and a lot of them look very similar, and I feel like I might have gotten lost had I just been wandering around on my own. But this tour was really informative and fun. Our tour guide Belinda was adorable, and we started out in the Forbidden City area. Now, back to kind of the trend of just feeling like you stand out a little bit. I definitely noticed it again on this day. What was very interesting was that there were a lot of school groups there. I kind of equate it, in the US there's a lot of school groups who visit like state capitals or Washington DC, and I think it's a similar situation in Beijing. So we saw so many school groups, and what was so interesting is that once again, there were a lot of people kind of, looking at us and taking pictures. I think I first started realizing it when Jake and I will often take pictures of each other while we're traveling. So I asked him to take a picture of me in front of one of the buildings, and while he was taking that picture, there was a school group passing by, and literally like 4 kids whipped out their phones to take a picture of me while I was posed there. Earlier on in that day, I was feeling kind of frustrated about it and not wanting to engage or acknowledge, and not really, wanting to smile about it. Later on, we did realize too, after our guide was talking to some of the teachers on the groups, and a lot of them were from really rural areas of China where also internet's controlled in China, so you don't have completely free access to the internet. And also, we were actually some of the first foreigners they had ever seen. So after I had heard that, I did kind of, relax about it and figured that, what I should really be doing, even if I feel uncomfortable, is being the best steward I can, best representative of other people, just so they're, getting a positive representation about people from other places. So I don't know, it was definitely an interesting thing we felt again there, but scenery was beautiful. The Forbidden City is incredibly massive, but also gorgeous architecture. Pretty crowded, but we had a positive time there, and we're happy we got to see it. Definitely not a minimalist structure by any means. After that, we went to the Temple of Heaven, which was honestly, I think, our favorite site we saw of the day. Just a much smaller complex, but beautiful temple there. And then after that, we went to the Summer Palace. And a lot of people in our tour group ended up doing this boat tour thing, but I had read some reviews and heard that the tour itself was kind of not that great, and also was a little pricey, so we decided to just walk around the grounds of the palace, but we loved that. There's this beautiful lake with lots of little boats on it, as well as just more beautiful architecture, so definitely very pleasant. And then finally on the last day, we went to the Temple of Confucius, which was really nice. Jake and I both think Confucius was a genius and love a lot of his ideas, even though again, that's getting into, ancient Chinese philosophy, but it was really cool to go there, kind of honor him. It's not the official temple for him, but basically like the #2 temple for him. The other one was further away in a spot that'd be tougher to get to within China. So we really enjoyed that. We also visited the Lana Temple, and it was pouring very heavily on this day, so unfortunately we were pretty much soaked. We didn't really have much of an option though, just because we were flying out that night, and so we packed our bags up, left them at the hotel, and then we're just exploring. got soaked there, but those 2 sites were really exceptional. So those are kind of the main activities we did. I know I probably left out a few smaller things. Ultimately, not only was the sightseeing beautiful and really fun, but I feel like gained so much just culturally from the experience, because it's by far the most, I don't want to say exotic, because I feel like the word exotic can have some negative connotations, but it was the most different from where we had traveled to before and what we had expected, but still incredibly positive. In terms of some travel tips, if you're booking a trip to China, definitely check visa requirements, and also they do have a new 5-day visa program that you can look into to see if that's a fit for you, or I guess visa-free travel for 5-day program, so that could be worthwhile. Overall, we found prices to be pretty good. Definitely cheaper in terms of the exchange rate between US dollars and then Chinese yuan. And then in terms of food, from a vegan perspective, it's a little challenging. Definitely was our toughest, but we didn't have any major issues. We, I think, probably ended up skipping a meal or two here or there, but we had snacks that we ate instead. We had to travel a little bit further to get to certain places. I think some of that comes from our own lack of preparedness. One of the downsides with our style of travel is since we go to a lot of places on the same trip, it's tough to fully prepare in terms of language and customs and all of that before each destination. And so because of that, we hadn't really done a lot of prep work. Had we been more comfortable with speaking Mandarin or had more key phrases prepared, it might have been a little bit easier, and I might have trusted more going to, you know, just everyday kind of food places. But since I was a little bit nervous and really did not want to like accidentally eat meat or something like that, we did typically stick to vegetarian restaurants. Even though they're much more spread out, there are a lot of Buddhist restaurants, which by default are actually vegan. They also don't have things like garlic or onion, stuff like that, but those worked very well for us. The way the vegetables were cooked were absolutely amazing, and there are some different like mock meats and tofu and other things that are cooked very well. So definitely some great menus. A lot of the menus have pictures too, so that made things a little bit easier for us, especially since we really had pretty much zero Mandarin speaking skills. We did rely on the Happy Cow app for some information, especially with Google Maps. It was a little bit trickier sometimes. Places weren't exactly where they said they were, so it was definitely kind of a treasure hunt at times. There were moments where we'd plan out which places we'd want to go to, and we always had a backup place just because there were 3 or 4 places we tried going to but then either couldn't find or maybe the information was off, something like that. So we definitely wanted to be prepared, to have kind of backup places available. But yeah, the food overall, when we were able to find successful places, was very good. And even though it was by far the most difficult place for us to find certain things, just because it is a very meat-heavy, meat-centric cuisine, we were still able to manage just fine. So even if you are a vegan and you have wanted to go to China, you will be fine. So that kind of wraps up my discussion here about our trip to China. We had a really wonderful time. I hope you were able to get a sense of that from the pictures. And at this point, we just have a couple travel vlogs left, one for Bali in Indonesia and Australia. And those will be coming up very soon. If you'd like to check out any of our past travel vlogs, you can actually do that over here. And if you have not already, you can subscribe to the channel up here. We'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.